What's up, you guys? We are back with another episode of Sales Bro Pod. I believe this is going to be episode number 8. We've got TJ, Sales X SaaS on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
TJ, appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah. Happy to be here, Dylan.
So to really put things into perspective from the jump, can you let people know like kind of what you're currently doing at this moment, and then we'll take it back and see how you got there?
Yeah, certainly. So it's kind of a unique kind of convergence of forces where, I've been on money. Actually, I've been like kind of like from just like looking at, what's going on in money Twitter for quite a while. And then it kind of compelled me to, take some action with my agency. And at that time too, I had one of my best friends in his marketing agency where I was helping him with some of their like sales ops. And so based on all the things I was kind of picking up with Twitter and what I was doing on the side with him, it kind of just, spurred into, an agency. And so I've had my agency for a little less than I think a year now. And so it's a lead gen agency, but we're very like data focused. So we really put a lot of our efforts in terms of how we're targeting leads on behalf of our clients. And so we try to be really smart about that. And so that's led us to, building some backend software products too, to kind of help us do some web scraping and some other various work to really dial that in. And so, I'd say, primarily focused on the agency, but we're very like data driven in terms of how we try to get after, business. And so I'd say we're almost more so focused on like the conversion side over just like pumping out like insane volume. It's kind of, I think a key differentiator.
Yeah, I think most people, and I think that was in the notes, like most people are doing like just insane volume, burning through lead lists. Sure, they might get some results, but you can only do that for so long, right? So I'm definitely interested to dive more into that. But taking it back, man. I know you were previously just in sales, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get started with sales? Like, how did you know that was even something that you'd like to do?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't plan for it. I kind of fell into sales, and like I feel like that's often the case. When people are in sales, like it's not like a career as a child. You're like, that's what I want to do. But it's obviously highly rewarding, and there's a reason I've stayed with it. Really since the beginning. And so it actually started. I was in college, and I took this internship with a mobile app startup, and it was actually more of like a marketing kind of like coordinator role. And, upon like working closely with kind of the founding members there, they were like, hey, have you ever thought about doing sales? Like we have some sales roles actually that are going to be entering the market in Denver, where I used to live at the time. And so I didn't think much of it. I was just like, hey, you guys think I'll be good at it? Like, let's do it. What does that all entail? And so it was like pretty much door to door style, like sales, like even though it was a mobile app, it was centered on like the hospitality industry. And so, we're working with like hotels, restaurants, but so you're literally just going business to business. And so they actually came into town, like kind of showed me the ropes of like, hey, this is like, they gave us iPad, the whole like, kind of pitch deck we were supposed to work through. And so it was just like kind of just thrown into it. And, it was super challenging, but like it really kind of just sent me through the ringer to like kind of test my abilities and kind of my own like confidence around like putting myself out there like that. And so, I kind of just, that was kind of my first foot forward and into, taking that on as a career. And then after that, I worked with VMware, which is a big software company. And so that was like my first like big full-time sales role. And I remember like, I think it was like maybe the second quarter of my work there, I closed this really large contract. It's like a 600 some K contract. And it was like, I think it's like 8 times what the typical renewal rate was for that. And I remember it just like kind of like left me buzzing. Like I remember like I got like shout outs from like, my supervisors, their supervisors, like our VP, regional VP. And it was just kind of like the excitement that came behind that, it ended up rewarding me in like a big commission check and everything. So that was kind of like my first like kind of aha moment of like, oh, sales is like, is pretty dope, man. Like, like I didn't think that I was even like capable of, doing something like that. But like, I got a
Mhm.
lot of guidance around. I had some great leaders. And so it kind of just like catapulted me forward in my confidence in terms of my abilities to like sell things.
Yeah.
And from there, I worked with various other tech startups and kind of fell into a lot of leadership based roles. I've always liked kind of the operational side as well as like sales training. So, almost every role I've jumped into has been like as a sole, as an individual contributor. But, it's almost always kind of like, kind of evolved more into like a leadership type role or operational type role. And so,
Mm.
I've just loved sales because, there's just so many different ins and outs of it. It's not just like the, being on the phone calls, there's a lot of things on the, kind of under the hood that are allowing things to work efficiently. And so that's kind of the things I take, a
Yeah.
lot of my joy in now at this stage is just really looking at like, all right, where can we get smarter? Where can we strategize? Where can we look at the data? All those type of things.
Yeah. So would you say, because I had a similar story in which I kind of stumbled into sales. I came
Mm-hmm.
on as like project manager, then went to estimating, which was primarily a sales job. Would you say you were like the typical sales like sales? I guess yeah. Would you say you're like the typical salesperson? Like, did you see yourself being a salesperson, even though it wasn't something you considered? Like, did you believe that that would be something you could do, or did you have like some limiting beliefs around that?
I mean, I definitely had some limiting beliefs because, like, I got my teeth kicked in too. When I remember, like, the first time I went out in the field, it was me and one other guy, and when we didn't have the helping hand of, like, say, like, this is still like, in that very first sales role I had at that internship, like, you're now out there all on your own, and you're going there, you're in the blistering heat, you're going door to door, your shirt's starting to stick to you, and you start just being like, fuck, man, like, once you get told off enough times, you can tell yourself, till you're blue in the face that, I got this, but like
Yeah.
everyone's going to hit those lulls where like you do have that self-doubt creep in, and so
Yeah.
I think the most important thing to like kind of take away from that is like you have to go long enough to get enough wins to be like, this is part of the process. Like, even if you're the best salesperson ever, like you're going to have those lulls. And so you have to mentally like go through that whole like cycle of like, hey, this is part of it, And so
Yeah.
I think, it took me to get some really big wins, like, and it wasn't necessarily right off the bat for me to be like, all right, like this is for me to be good. You also have to have that mental fortitude to be like, hey, this is part of the whole process,
Yeah. How big of a contributor do you think your door to door experience was for you, progressing through your sales career and then ultimately ending up where you are now? Because a lot of people I speak to, like, they can attribute a lot of their foundation to the fact that they did door to door or cold calling, like the tough work, right? Do you feel the same?
Yeah, 100%. Because I mean, I don't think there's almost anything tougher. I mean, even I've done cold calls, I've been on dialers, all those type things, and like for how even like much anxiety and fear you can have like doing those, like nothing be more fearful than like going into a business and and you're like trying to find the business owner, decision maker, whatever it may be, like that's really putting yourself out there like almost to the highest degree, and so you're not hiding behind anything, right? You're like face to face with this person now. You don't want to stumble on your words. You want to appear confident. You want to know what you're selling. And so I think like putting yourself in that type of environment, once you've done that, you're like everything else at least seems like easy in comparison. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing I think that could have been better for me to just like be kind of thrown to the wolves and be like, hey, this is there's not going to be much tougher stuff than this, right? Like if you can do door to door and you can kick ass at door to door, you could probably kick ass doing anything sales related, just because you're doing the same thing. You're just doing it, with no barriers if you can do that.
Yeah. And dude, door to door, it's like you've heard the saying, the hardest door to open is the car door, like for you to actually
Yeah.
start, right? Um, but yeah, I think the biggest differentiator between those who like actually have success in it and those who don't are that like they just do it longer. Like
Yeah.
it's so simple that like if you show up and do that, you know, you hit 100 doors a day, like it would be unreasonable for you not to get better at it, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're like, you know, something's not right upstairs or anything. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think like some of these guys, from what I see now, because I know a lot of like younger sales guys who have, you know, maybe they've just finished that experience or they're in it now. But like you've got people on this side of the spectrum who are like, bro, door to door sucks. I haven't made any money. And then you got like on the other side where it's like, dude, I love door to door and I made like 30 grand last month. And like, so I think the biggest differentiator is time in the game. But so you went from straight out of school. By the way, you graduated with a degree, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I
Cool.
studied business management with emphasis in information systems. And so the interesting part too is like, I didn't know if I was like at that point after that internship, like in school, I was like, all right, am I going to go like try to go the more technical route, or am I going to like, you know, go the more business route, AKA, you know, kind of sales, you know, more or
Yeah.
less. And so that was a really tough decision, but like the opportunities I was given, like in terms of like, you know, job interviews and stuff was so much better on the sales front. And like the types of companies I was interviewing with were, you know, just so much better than, you know, other more technical based roles. And so that was too, like kind of an eye opener too, to be like, damn, like once you have some of that base experience to like stand on, it's so easy to like move up in sales just because like essentially your track record is your everything. Like, you know,
Yeah.
it's like if you can stand on a strong track record, like people love to see fresh faced salespeople. Like we've hired, you know, dozens and dozens of fresh faced salespeople. Like you just see that people have that the energy and they just have enough just to be like, hey, even if it's sometimes as little as 6 months, if they like, you know, had a kick ass, you know, experience and or you know, track record to back up, you know, what they can do. Like, you know, that's all you really need to make that big leap forward. And you just don't see that in many other role types where like people can just make massive leaps from like not just like the different types of companies or industries you work for, but to really just move up pretty quickly, whether you want to go management, account executive, you know, closer, any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you, by the way, when did you graduate school?
So I graduated 2015.
Okay. Cool. And then so you went in the direction that you did, door knocking, then doing, I'd assume you went to like more tech cold calling route.
And so
hit
now
the
and like
diamond.
VMware is like, mind you, like a really big, like it's a massive corporate company. Like almost, you know, every major company probably has some of their software. But it was kind of also interesting where having like that really ground level startup experience in contrast to what it was like in a more corporate environment, I realized like the corporate thing wasn't really for me. It's like the money is great. Like if you want stability and like making lots of money, like go work for a huge tech company. Like don't even go the startup route. But the startup experience is what's given me like everything skill based. You know, like I gained some confidence at VMware, but like I didn't gain all the skills I've worked with startups. And so that's what kind of brought me back in the startup loop of like working with really challenging, fast growing companies. Like that's the greatest opportunities you can have, you know, just because you can be involved in so many different areas. So, you know, that's kind of the route I went with it.
Yeah. I think like even seeing that on the high ticket coaching or agency side of things, it's like those smaller clients where, you know, it's less plug and play and it's more like, okay, let's implement this and now that's going to break and now we need to build this and now do this and that. Like it teaches you so much. And then like, I mean, like you said, the track record, nobody can take it away from you. It's everything. You have that under your belt. Like it just gets better and better and better as far as the clients that you can work with and the results that you can get.
Exactly.
So you're primarily working with startups right now.
Yeah. So I like working with, tech startups, so usually software products, as well as we've just happened to work with a lot of digital marketing agencies, and it's kind of, you know, those are like the most, of course, saturated niches that everyone's trying to tap into. But it's just that I have my experience there on the tech front. So,
Yeah.
I think also that's an approach that we've taken with some of our clients, is we've taken on even more technical clients. Like we have a big software development firm that we work with, and they've been really challenging. Like selling web development and software services is really tough, because it's just like it's hard to stand out in that space, and it's like it's harder to build like a personal brand around yourself with like more technical expertise. So with them, we've actually taken an approach, like just as kind of a side example of like, we analyze like job listings based on like different areas of their tech stack that would either be like a complement or like a substitute to certain things that may, be in their tech environment. So like there's a lot of different, approaches you can take with stuff like that. But digital marketing agencies are kind of like, I'd say our bread and butter is like, we just understand like kind of across the board how, like, I would say digital marketing agencies, to kind of backtrack a bit, like I think they don't really have great sales departments. They may have a sales guy here and there, but they don't have good sales processes. Like marketing people just usually aren't geared that way. And so we've done really well working with a lot of marketing agencies.
So do you guys do the whole like lead gen and sales implementation, or like where does your work start and where does it stop?
Yeah, so we have like kind of tiered, like 2 tiered services. So one's like very just data, like it's just like purely just like we're providing lead data, and we're like enriching it based off like certain insights that we can segment from. And so like, to give you an idea, if like someone already has like some pre-existing infrastructure, we will be like, hey, well, we'll gather some preliminary info on like their target market, the different personas, and then we'll be like, hey, like, we'll see like how we can target those type of people. And so we'll just more or less provide them the data, be like, hey, this is how we target them, but it's left up to their own people and their own sales guys to do it. And then we have our tier 2 services, which is like full service, and there's almost like no limitations as to what we will be involved in terms of the sales process. It's like, hey, we're going to make sure like your landing pages look good. We're going to make sure like your LinkedIn looks good. We're going to run all the campaigns for you. We'll help like provide sales support if like you feel like your sales guys are like struggling on sales calls or things of that nature. Like I think actually where a lot of sales teams make the biggest like jumps of progress is within like how their sales people are conducting themselves on like their sales phone calls. So if like we can get like a call recording or whatnot, there's usually a lot of that can be gained from those types of conversations of being like, hey, like this is like how you guys are approaching your calls or whatnot. So there's really no limitations as to where we'll involve ourselves with our tier 2 service. It's like what you may also kind of hear in, money Twitter of like the growth partner, it's kind of like, hey, if we have a guy that can help in a certain area of your business, like we'll find that and facilitate it for you and all that.
Okay. Gotcha. So what is like, if you have one, like your power offer, like if you have to explain to someone what you can do for them in like 10, 20 seconds, like what is your unique offer?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to get them higher engagement and meeting rates than they are with current campaigns if they're running outreach. So like what we'll usually see is like what they're converting at. And it's usually just, really low across the board. It's usually not just low, open rates, but just really, really low engagement. And if they are getting engagement, it's not positive engagement. So what we're doing, like a good kind of like kind of secondary, like sense of like how our campaigns are doing is like how they're being received. Even if someone's like not interested at that like very point in time, like the sentiment should be like, actually, it's interesting. Like you mentioned it, like we've talked about it, but not at this time, or like, hey, we'd love to discuss this at X date, because it's like being positively received. We're not trying to just like spam people in any way. We want to be really intentional with how we do our outreach. And so we're essentially trying to identify pains at scale, and so that we can speak to a very specific group of people based on that specific like pain point. So like give you an example, like we may like we have a couple SEO clients, like we may find that like a certain segment maybe only post like X amount of times like a month, but maybe it's not substantial enough to like increase their like search rank results. And so we'll like see if that's, been a pain point to that segment. And then it kind of just leads them in the direction of like what our client can do for them, obviously to like kind of fill that gap. So like our strategy is to really kind of identify the pain points of our clients, customers. Yeah. And so that we can kind of run the campaigns around that and be really intentional with how we reach these people.
Are you offering like a certain number of guaranteed X, be it like, hey, we guarantee a minimum of X new appointments or X revenue, or is it something where like there's not really a metric associated with success on this partnership?
Yeah, so we'll give them kind of like a scale of like, hey, here's some similar clients to your service and like what we've done for them, and then we'll kind of like highlight a key, like maybe a few things that kind of made that person like maybe a good use case of being like, hey, these people have really strong case studies, like for instance, like so like kind of highlighting that like there's different variables that are going to lead to your own success, and that also allows them to kind of get their ducks in a row, so you make sure that like, hey, if you are going to work together, they understand what needs to be done on their end, because like maybe they do have case studies, they haven't put them together. Like those are things that need to be like all in order before you kind of get jump started. So I think putting a lot of focus there too.
Yeah. How was the transition from grunt level sales guy, like door to door, to then moving up to like sales leadership, and then from like sales leadership for these companies to eventually doing your own thing? Like how did all that play out?
I mean, again, sales is so interesting, man. It just creates avenues that you wouldn't imagine. And I think everyone has a really unique story. Anyone that's like has sales as a core to like their like skill set, like they're always going to have a really unique, like, kind of trajectory of where their career is taking them. And so, I mean, it's been really interesting, man, because again, I think few jobs other than maybe like software engineering, like will offer you the flexibility of sales. And so that's what I love too. But to give you an idea, like, so after VMware, I was like, all right, I want to work with a startup again. So I worked, with various startups that were all like, in high growth stages. And then, I found that I like leadership because I feel like I can extend my abilities farther than my own like contribution. So I've done that. And then for me to like make that leap to like do it on my own, like I didn't just do it like overnight. Like this was a very slow, like steady kind of like, burn of like, all right, like, is it viable? Is it viable? And I think, again, it was just a unique kind of set of circumstances where money Twitter was honestly a huge influence. Like you see guys build businesses, I wouldn't say easily, but you get insights to how it could be done. Like the blueprints are there. You gotta put in the work. And so like I would read up on certain guys, on money Twitters. There's really just a few select. They put it all out there. Like you look at guys that like Sean, like 0 to 10K, and like guys like that, like they'll provide you all the little nuances of like what you need to know. And of course you got to kind of put it in motion. But so I started just doing little by little, I was like, all right, let me like, do like email setup, kind of like start a campaign and it's just little by little. I was like, okay. And then I was helping my friend with his, marketing agency. He referred me to, one of his guys. And then I'm like, okay, so now I kind of have like the wheels turning here. Like I can feel kind of the momentum. And then just at a certain point, you just have to, have that confidence to just go, a little bit more into it. Yeah. So I think it was just like, testing it. Like, some people say maybe to like take a dive, but I was really just kind of dip my toes. And I'm like, okay, now like, I kind of know how I can integrate this into the rest of my life. So, and I've done it alongside, many other like jobs too. So it's not to say that I'm not juggling it among other things.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, what was the event that happened to where it became very black and white, very clear as to now or then being the perfect time for you to fully transition?
Like, I don't think if there ever was like a single like profound moment that really like shifted my thinking and be like, hey, this is like all or nothing. I think, I had kind of a sequence of getting a few really good clients. And I think that was enough to really lean into, to be like, all right, if we can build some strong case studies with these guys, which are all really cool, companies to work with, like it's again, another like layer to that foundation that you're building to like, kind of stand on. So it's like, all right, I don't just have my like startup sales experience now, like I also have case studies for like my business. And so once you get those things, like it's, once you have that social proof and you can speak to things that you've done, in that space, it's like, all right, now I can kind of, open the sales and go with this.
Yeah, most of the guys that I spoke to have had a similar jump at some point in their career from, maybe a traditional sales job to high ticket sales or their own agency or something like that. And a lot of them have the idea that, including myself, where, hey man, if everything, shit hit the fan, I was down bad and I needed money, like I could always go back to the industry that I was previously in because of my resume and find a job in a week.
Yeah.
Did you have that same thought process?
So I think it's the confidence of like having like optionality, and like it was so much easier too, because like this year would be tougher if I would have made like the jump, like say like this year, to start doing more of like my agency stuff rather than like some of the other things I had going on with my full-time job. Like it would be, definitely a bit more daunting, where like you think what happened in like, 2021 and some 22, like it was just seemed like ripe with opportunity, so much was going on. And so like, I had, always my LinkedIn with recruiters. I had, the things that were starting with my agency last year. And so you have kind of like these things that give you confidence to be like, hey, I always can fall back on something, like, right. Like it may not be the most ideal situation, but like, if you have basic sales skills, you'll always be able to feed yourself is kind of right. The thinking, once you again have that record to speak to, is like, that's all people want to know is all right, like what have you done and what can you do for us?
Yeah. I always thought, after I made the jump out of roofing, I was like, okay, worst case scenario, I'll go back to roofing. But then I extended that further. I was like, dude, worst case scenario, like I could go sell fucking cars and make 70 grand a year. Like worst case scenario. Or I could sell like anything, bro. Like, and I have a degree as well, but it's in construction science. So I was like, actually, worst case scenario, I could go manage like a construction project or like a neighborhood construction or something. There's tons of that in Texas. And I might be working 80 hours a week, but I'll bring home like 60 or something a year. So I don't know, that's been super big for me. And I'm 24. I'm not like super young, like some of these guys doing it. And you're, from what I understand, you're a little older than 24, right?
Yeah. So I'm 32, man. So I have almost 10 years of like work in the field now. But yeah. So I'm probably pretty freaking old in terms of money to it.
I mean, in terms of like a lot of the kids that come on and consume, yeah, probably. But like the people that are actually doing stuff, most of them aren't kids. You have, being that you are, a little bit older, you obviously had some obligations for others in your life, and I'm sure you had maybe some expenses and stuff like that. How much did that play a deciding factor in you either like, pushing off jumping into your agency or maybe expediting it? Like, did that play a big part?
Yeah, that's honestly a great question, man. Because to give you some context, I don't even know if you know this, Dylan, but like I have a son, and like we actually have a little girl along the way. So we're due here in a couple months, and so so like I have my family, my wife, stay at home, and so like there's a lot that obviously like weighs on your shoulders to be like, hey, like these decisions should not be taken lightly. Like they need to be very intentional in terms of like why and what like the benefits are going to be of doing this over the alternative of like staying in a steady 9 to 5 job. And so I don't necessarily think that they're mutually exclusive. You know, you always hear the smart people say like, don't ever just like quit your job and go all in. Like, you know, I've never thought that, you know, I think that you can always juggle the two because, you know, it's like, why not take that security blanket of knowing you have a guaranteed check and doing something risky, you know, on top of that. It's like, yeah, I may put, you know, 5, 10,000 at risk here and there, but like if it's in your own personal development, it's never in vain. You know, it's always going to pay off in some way. It's always going to be like, I gained X skill, or, you know, I learned, you know, X lesson in this, is the ultimate takeaway with that. So like, I never felt that like, you know, say in the worst case scenario that, you know, all my main clients fired me and, you know, I lost my job. You know, I think as long as you have like a runway to get you 3 to 6 months time, like you can always get back on your feet. And kind of back to our point of like sales can get you back to, you know, where you need to be. And so you kind of like, you know, you got to kind of revel in some of that risk too, is being like, hey, don't make any stupid risks. Like don't just, you know, put all your, you know, chips on, you know, black or red, but really, you know, kind of take your risks, like knowing that like, hey, like what is the worst case scenario? Like if you're not going to be like, you know, dead out on the street, like most things like you're always going to come back from. And I think you have to take some big losses along the way to realize like, hey, it's all, you know, part of the process too, is like, hey, like as long as you're not on the streets and you pay your basic necessities, like it's going to be okay. You know, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Most of the guys that I speak to that are looking to make that jump, and you know, it's like a craze right now, making internet money and doing all that. They're younger, or, you know, early mid 20s, and it's like they don't really have all that much to lose and they have a lot more to gain. So it doesn't, you know, it doesn't make sense not to try if it's something they're thinking about. But once you get like to where you have, you know, more obligations, it definitely becomes a lot more of a serious decision, because you got to make sure you have the runway. That was one thing for me, even though like I don't really have much, you know, much depending on me as a younger guy. I had built up like a nice savings that pretty much, like, I knew that I could sit in my fucking bed for a year or 2 years, not do anything, and I would still be good. So I was like, if I could somehow make this work enough to like cover my expenses, that would then just extend the runway. Like that's what it's been about, is just extending the runway. Once you really find that thing that is scalable, then you just go all in, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's you know, I think part of you, or especially for like, you know, the young 20-year-old guys, like you should take some massive risks and fall on your ass for it, because like you can go back to your parents' house, you know, whatever it may be. Like you do have a fallback. Like I like, you know, I could theoretically go back to, you know, my parents. I never would want to put myself in their shoes. But like when you're in your 20s, and especially, you know, if you're in this corner of the internet, like you're already so far ahead. Like some of these guys don't realize, like, you know, how far ahead of the game they are just being in this kind of like, you know, corner of the internet. And so if you're even like privy to like the things that are going on, you know, you can get wrapped up in the bubble, but you realize like you're way ahead, like years and years ahead of a lot of people. And so you should fall on your ass. You should like absolutely, you know, have to rebuild a couple times. Like, you know, in my sales career, I've had to rebuild a couple times, even where like, you know, startups didn't, you know, they didn't have their runway. You know, they're trying to scrape to get funding or whatever it may be, like, and, you know, so nothing materialized into what you thought it was going to be. So there's a lot of things that you should just like go into knowing that there's a lot of risk, and, you know, the younger you are. And of course you got to kind of mitigate that risk once you do have more responsibilities, but I don't think it means that you can't take you know, risk as well.
Dude, I have this kid I was talking to. He's 18, and he was appointment setting for a coaching program of like, I think the last 2.5 months, and he set like 2.2 million in pipeline. He had like 600 or so K close, and he had, you know, great stats. And now he's in the position of, he's stepping away from that because companies, you know, they're iffy, and he's got an opportunity to either cold call where the OTE is like 144K, or appointment set where the OTE is like minimum 120K.
Yeah.
And he's like super torn between which to go after. I'm like, dude, honestly, it doesn't really matter. You just need you need to pick one. And you need to lean into it, because you could blow both these opportunities, fuck up for like 5 more years, and you'd still be better off than most with the resume that you've built in the last 3 months. Like
Yeah.
he's become like now undeniable, and he's an 18-year-old kid. Um, so yeah, that's one thing that in sales, not only the resume, but in high ticket sales, especially, people, when you hop on a call with somebody, like it's very, very easy to get a feel for like their competence on whatever you're meeting about. Like if I hop on a call with another sales guy, like I can tell very quickly whether they do it or whether they don't.
Yeah.
And so even just being able to interview well, bro, like I've seen people come with no sales experience and they're just like super sharp, competent people. And then they lock in like a closer role from the jump, where their, on target earnings is 10K a month.
Yeah.
So the resume, and then just how you carry yourself, man. Like you can fuck up. If you're a young guy, you can fuck up like many times over. And by the time you're 21, 22, 25, like, you'll if you keep going, you're gonna figure something out. Like it'd be very unreasonable for you not to.
Exactly. Yeah, and you'll be surprised that, like, again, those lessons you learn even in the, event that you do have a big, failure of sorts, like, you're just growing that experience. And, that's what prospective employers want to hear anyways, is like how you've taken really big loss and overcome adversity. Like those are going to take you further than, cookie cutter answers or perfect,
Yeah.
career trajectory. It's like people want to see the adversity, and that's really what makes people stand out. It's like, if you're personal and you've overcame adversity, like you're already like a top prospect is like as a candidate,
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to get into this as our time is getting close to the end here. But as far as one of the points we want to talk about was new age outbound strategies, and kind of
Yeah.
your unique, perspective on the whole lead generation thing for your clients. I don't even know where to start. A lot of these kids are out here Chad turbo ramming, 10,000 leads a day. Like, what is your unique approach? Like, what's been working for you?
Yeah. So like the truth is, like, if it gets results for your clients, that's what they paid you for, right? But like I know with some of the clients we work with and stuff, like they don't want to hurt their online reputation. Like you'd be surprised at how many people, if you don't exclude them in your outreach, they'll already have previous connections with, or there could be a prior client or whatever. Like, so you are, especially in certain niches, like you'll be surprised at how quickly you can run through, a certain segment of someone's addressable market, and so if you're going through that TAM and you're running their name, in a negative way or in a way that's not reflective of the way they want to be seen, you're just not doing good work, because you've got to put yourself in their shoes too. It's like, hey, like how would they want to represent themselves online? And like, would they want to just spam a couple of thousand emails a day blindly? Probably not, and so that's again kind of there's, I think, a couple things to keep in mind is like, that's just, it can get you quick results, but I just don't think it's sustainable, because one, it's like a reputational standpoint. Two, you're only going to have so much total addressable market to get after. And like three, it's just probably not a best practice, because it's like, email filters and all those things are getting more and more sophisticated, that, you can always try to be on the cutting edge of what's going on to send really high volume and like have 30, 50 domains, which I think some people do, but I don't think that should be a means for you getting results for your clients. Like if you're conversion focused, you're doing something that strikes like, a clear message based on their value prop in who you're reaching out to. So it's, you're trying to go to market to fill that gap in for prospects that may have a need for the solution you're selling. And so that's, we're really just trying to look through the data to be like, okay, what can give us signals to that pain point so that we can feel really confident about reaching out to these people, with this reason. And the thing is, like, we're still doing it at volume, but it's like very intentional. So it's like, you know, we're personalizing at scale based on like the segment rather than like a first line or anything of that nature. You know, it's like, hey, this is a segment that has a very specific pain point based on a solution we offer. Let's reach out to them because we can kind of nudge them in our direction.
Cool. How important do you think it is for sales guys to know how to do this stuff?
I mean, I think it's really important. I think there's a couple things that are important here. I think for the future of sales is like, one is I think leveraging current technology. I think it's, you know, you hear all the use cases of like AI and stuff. The opportunities are kind of endless with that. So I think really trying to leverage that in some area of your process. Like we use it to, you know, clean a lot of our data. We use it for lead scoring. And there's just so many different new use cases. So I think like leveraging current technology, I think staying, keeping up with like the trends again of like email filters and things of that nature. Like I think they'll continually to get more sophisticated and strict in terms of how you can do things. And then third is showing yourself and your personality more. And so I think what we're going to see an emergence of is like, you know, people making those cold calls, because now I know I'm talking to a human. I don't have to wonder if that cold email I got was automated or generated through AI. And so there's like a point of diminishing returns where AI can't, I think, get you the engagement you need. Like you have to use it still in a way that's streamlines your process, but it's not like taking away the sales elements of like, you know, presenting your own personality and your ability to empathize with them. So I think it's like, you know, kind of making the most of all those things, you know, moving forward.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, how are you implementing AI into what you're doing? And I mean, where do you see that, or like, how do you see that changing the landscape of the lead gen space?
Yeah. So I think we're already starting to see it where like people are having a hard time differentiating whether something was written with AI or not. And we're just going to see more and more of that be the case. And so that's kind of bad, I think, for cold emailers. Is it can, I think for a certain point in time, like maybe the time is now, that like you can actually maybe leverage it so that people aren't like, you know, aware of that being a common practice. Kind of like when first lines first came out, like people didn't know that like there was like, they were just extracting like, you know, inputs from like your LinkedIn or whatever, and then just being like, oh, cool, you know, school or whatever. So I think it's like, there's going to be a point in time where like, you know, the AI is maybe not efficient in that way, but I think it's really efficient for like dynamic, like filtering. So like when you like, for instance, go to like a big mainstream database, like Uplead, Apollo, Crunchbase, any of those, like you're working from data that every other sales guy is working from. And so you can get a lot smarter about how you're looking at that data, and you can use AI to differentiate things that aren't necessarily present within that like static data that you see in front of you, but you can almost like enrich it in your own way so that you can have your own like unique segmentation or a way that you want to use it that maybe other people aren't using. So I think it's like more so getting smart about it that way rather than like messaging. You know, there's just, again, so many use cases, but it's just cool because, you know, we're using it very much for that, of like finding unique ways to segment lists, being able to decipher things. Like, for instance, say you have like a tech list, but you want just SaaS companies. Like you can use AI to now make that own interpretation for you that like, hey, this is not just a tech company, like this is a SaaS company. You know, there is a distinction. And so you can get more granular in terms of like you're targeting that way too. And so there's some like cool ways to use it. I think, you know, in terms of like how you're looking at the data.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to get to the point where if you're not using AI, like you're getting left behind? Or I don't actually, I think not the question is if, but like when do you think that point will be?
Man, I don't think I've ever seen a technology move so quick, like ever. Like, so GPT like 3 has even been around for a little while before it like went really mainstream. But like now that like you think of like how quick they're making advancements with like people like all opening their eyes to the opportunities, like it's kind of endless. And so what it's going to do is open the playing field to so many smart people that may have not even like thought of it. And so it's going to get really competitive where like now it's not just the kind of techies that were in this like kind of like, underworld of what was going on with GPT-3 before. Now everyone's kind of like open to the opportunities here. So it's like there's going to be the smartest people all dipping their toes in it. Like I'm even, I've consulted with a lot of top executives. Everyone's got their ear to it. Like, we don't know how we're going to use AI, but like we know we got to be ahead of this. Like people are going to put hundreds of thousands, millions in their own, research and development to have it be some part of their business process. Yeah. So it's like, I think you have to think about like, okay, what, generally everyone knows how it works now. It's like, all right, now look at kind of like your process step by step, like what would be, practical in terms of implementing it at this step that's not going to be a detriment in any way. And I think that's another reason it's still somewhat questionable, I think, to do it from a messaging standpoint. Like we've done some campaigns where it's like we automate what it says, and sometimes they'll still go rogue and say some batshit crazy stuff. So it's like we may not be there yet, but it probably will get there to a point that you can like rely on it more. It's just a matter about like where you want to use it in your process, because everyone's so unique, in their own. But it's pretty crazy just because the space is moving so fast. You just don't know. Like, I think the time is, but to answer your question, I think like the time is probably now. It's like, you should probably get ahead of it now if you're going to make it part of your process, because a lot of people are doing it and it's going to accelerate the speed at which companies advance.
Yeah. And if you can crack the code and learn how to use it effectively in a way that's applicable to, people who are making money, you're probably like, dude, this is going to be like the next gold rush. Like the money that is going to come out of this for those who can figure it out is going to be insane.
Like I wouldn't even compare it with like Web3 or any of that stuff. Like it's really unique because I think it's here to stay 100%. It's just like, how's it going to play in our lives?
I mean, the thing with Web3 is like, it's very easy to ignore because it's not in front of you. It's not like it could be like you could surround yourself, put yourself in that environment, but like you log off or you clock out of work for the day. Like it's not there unless you want it to be. With AI, like it's fucking everywhere, and it's gonna be increasingly more so everywhere. So I got a call in a couple of minutes, but I did want to ask you your services, your coaching, consulting, list building, targeting, lead gen. What do you have to offer to the people?
Yeah. So always happy to do consulting calls, call coaching or whatever it may be in terms of like, potential challenges you're having with your sales process. But we also have, we have software development right now, kind of doing a lot of what I'm talking about here in terms of what we do on the back end with our agency in terms of fulfillment, where we should have our software available probably in the next couple months, where essentially it's going to enrich a lot of like the marketing insights that you need. So it's primarily geared towards people that are in the digital marketing field, but it's going to identify pain points for businesses that may be lacking in certain areas of their marketing strategy, and then being able to like automate that segmentation so that those lists are already pre-segmented so that you can put them into your sending tool and, kind of streamline your process that way. Is a lot of work goes into not only kind of honing in on those pain points, but also like segmenting it out in a meaningful way. And so that's what our tool is working to achieve, is to kind of break that down for you so that like how you can reach out to, each segment.
Hell yeah. Yeah, dude, I think this has been a really solid episode. You're the first guy who's come on with like, who's not more lead gen focused, but like it's more of what you do versus just sales. And I know there's going to be guys either from your audience or my audience that are going to resonate with that greatly. So got to wrap it up here, unfortunately, but I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dylan. It's always a pleasure catching up with you, man. And this is a whole new way of doing it.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, guys, if you want to follow this guy, SalesX SaaS with 3 A's, 4 A's?
I think
3
two.
A's.
I think it must have been a typo there.
Okay, yeah. So Sales Like SaaS, you'll find it. You'll find it. I'm following him. You'll see that. And I'll drop all the stuff for myself and him below here. But appreciate you guys watching. TJ, thanks for coming on. Catch you guys on the next one.
Yeah, appreciate you, Dan. Bye.